Chapter 2. The scheme was settled. Bingley would discover the address of the gardeners and send it to Georgiana as soon as he was able. Then, she and Mrs. Annesley would pay a visit while out on a shopping excursion. Darcy, of course, was not to know about any of this. It was imperative that they discover the quality of Miss Elizabeth's relations before they attempted any sort of dissuasion of Darcy's beliefs. Keeping her plans from being discovered by her brother proved to be far easier than Georgiana had expected it to be, for her brother either kept to his room, indulging in sleep, or sequestered himself in his study, pushing books around and consuming far more brandy than was his normal habit. While these actions made for much simpler scheming, it also caused both Mrs. Annesley and Georgiana to worry about Darcy. He had taken a quiet dinner with them on Thursday, the day of his arrival, but it was not until Saturday afternoon when he once again made an appearance at any sort of table where Food and his sister both were. "I'm thinking of returning to Pemberley," he said, taking a seat near the tea table that was laid out in the music room. "I see no need to tolerate the season this year. If we leave soon, we shall likely miss the worst of the cold weather, and the roads will still be passable." Georgiana lowered her teacup to the table. This would not work. If he was at Pemberley, there would be no way to work on him to return to Netherfield and Miss Elizabeth. "If you do not wish to remain in town, Netherfield would be more convenient," she suggested. He set his jaw and shook his head. "I shall not be returning to Netherfield." "Not ever?" she asked in surprise. "No, never." Georgiana recoiled slightly at his harsh tone. "I apologise for my incredulity, brother. I had thought you a gentleman of your word." She rose from her chair, leaving her tea and sandwich behind, and crossed to the instrument. She could not enjoy her tea when her brother was threatening to unsettle all her hopes to see him happy. She leafed through her music. "I shall ask Bingley to join us at Pemberley," her brother continued, "where I shall be able to instruct him about estate management from the comfort of my own home." She turned toward her brother. "You will teach him to manage your estate, not his." "An estate is an estate," her brother argued. His arms were folded and he wore that scowl which said his opinion was not going to be swayed. It was unfortunate for him that she was not willing to believe in the immovability of his opinion. His thinking was faulty, moulded and warped by emotions. She knew it was, and because of this, she also knew that with time and persistence, it was not entirely improbable that he would see his error. Had she not also, at one point, been swayed by emotion into believing a falsehood? And though it had taken the crushing blow of the revelation of Mr. Wickham's intentions to help her see her error, she had seen it, and was better for it. The same would be true for her brother. She just needed to persist as strongly as she could until he saw how he was wrong. He will not come alone, she argued, hoping the dread of being confined to Pemberley with the Hursts and Caroline Bingley for an indefinite period of time would be enough to shake from his mind the foolishness of running as far as he could from Miss Elizabeth. "Caroline will remain in town for the season," Darcy countered. "She will not leave." Georgiana shook her head. "Oh, my dear brother, how mistaken you are! She has no wish to find a husband other than you." Her brother shrugged. "I will not invite her." Georgiana sighed. "She will manage to invite herself. You know she will. I know nothing of the sort." "Then you are a blockhead," Georgiana said firmly. She knew that such a comment would draw his anger, but at present something needed to shake him from his stubborn, morose state of mind. "Georgiana!" His tone was harsh and scolding as she knew it would be. She wished to apologise immediately. It was not like her to call her brother names. However, no matter how wrong it was or how red her face burned with shame, she would not retreat from attempting to make him see reason. "What else do you call someone who refuses to see things as they are? You know that Caroline Bingley has long desired to become your wife and mistress of Pemberley. In her 3 seasons, she has never entertained any gentleman in a fashion that would suggest she was looking for a husband, unless that gentleman was you. She hangs on your every word. She prances and preens to get your attention. She flatters and attempts to make me her sister." She blew out an exasperated breath. "I do not despise her. She's a friend of sorts, but surely you must see what she's about." She looked expectantly at her brother, who replied with a shrug. Georgiana rolled her eyes. He was so stubborn at times. "Very well, invite Bingley and see if his sisters do not both accompany him." She placed the pieces of music she still held on the piano and marched over to her seat. "I shall not like to live with you once you're married to her." I tolerate Miss Bingley quite well when we are together for a short duration, but I do not wish to be paraded about during my season by her." She blinked at the tears that unexpectedly gathered. Caroline was so very different from Georgiana. Caroline put herself forward. Georgiana did not, nor did she wish to be pushed forward in such a fashion. "I am not marrying Caroline," Darcy growled. "Do you truly think that you can survive a full winter at Pemberley without being trapped?" She wiped away a tear that had escaped her fluttering lashes, and then took a trembling sip of her tea. "No," she said with a firm shake of her head. "I will not allow it. We will not be leaving town." "You have very little say in the matter," Darcy retorted. "If I may," Mrs. Annesley interjected, and then waited to be acknowledged. "Miss Darcy's concern is not unfounded. A situation could very easily arise that would call your honour into question if the Bingleys were to travel to Pemberley with you. However, I believe the point to be moot. I understood Mr. Bingley to say he intended to return to Netherfield when last he called. He seemed very determined to do so." Georgiana wiped away a second tear and looked at her companion with trepidation. They had agreed that they would not tell Fitzwilliam of Bingley's plans until everything had been arranged. "Bingley is returning to Netherfield?" "Yes, sir. I do believe that is his intention." She smiled at her employer. "There is a lovely young lady who awaits him." Georgiana's eyes grew wide, and she dared to glance at her brother. He was staring open-mouthed at Mrs. Annesley. "But she is indifferent to him," he finally managed to mutter. "Has she said as much?" Mrs. Annesley queried. "No, but Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst assure me of its truth, and they were on friendly terms with Miss Bennet." Georgiana saw her companion's lips twitch just slightly, and she waited eagerly to hear the point Miss Annesley was about to make. "This would be the same Miss Bingley who insists her brother will marry Miss Darcy." "She insists what?" Darcy looked at his sister and then back at her companion. Georgiana nodded. "Caroline has told me many times how well her brother and I suit each other. I think," Mrs. Annesley continued before Darcy could form any more words, "that perhaps Miss Bingley does not wish to encourage an attachment between her brother and this Miss Bennet. I am certain that Miss Bennet's dowry and connections are not superior to Miss Darcy's." "No, not at all," Darcy replied. "Miss Bennet is of little standing. That would not benefit Miss Bingley in her quest to rise above her roots, now would it?" Mrs. Annesley poured a cup of tea and placed it before him. "A gentleman does not know the heart of any lady until he has made an inquiry of the lady in question. Until then, it is all hearsay and speculation. Admittedly, listening to such accounts, no matter their veracity, will save a few from certain heartbreak, but it will just as likely doom many to misery, having given up their heart's desire without so much as a whimper." Darcy eyed Mrs. Annesley cautiously over the rim of his teacup. The woman had come with impeccable references, and to date she had proved invaluable to his sister, taking Georgiana under her wing as if she was a mother hen, pushing her out from the safe repose of her room and home when it was needed to advance her recovery, and instructing her in every necessary accomplishment she would require when it came time to make her debut. Surely she was a lady whose advice was as good for him as it was for his sister. Yet he did not feel particularly ready to admit it. He did not wish to be rational and level-headed, for being rational and level-headed was precisely what had led him to leave Hertfordshire, and reduced him to his current miserable existence. He could not remain in town. The temptation to return to Netherfield would be too great. The knowledge that she was so near and yet so unattainable would be agonizing. If there was a distance between them, he might then be able to forget her with her lovely eyes, pleasing figure, and quick wit. He indulged in silence as he drank his tea. When his cup was empty, he placed it on the table and pushed to his feet. "Then," he said, "I will go to Pemberley by myself. I will send a request to Matlock House. I am certain Lady Matlock would welcome you to stay with her in my absence." Georgiana's eyes grew wide and filled with tears, causing him to look away. "You would leave me?" "At Christmas," she whispered. "Only because you refuse to go to Pemberley with me," he said, moving toward the door. "I will be in my study if you require anything, or if you change your mind." "When do you leave, sir?" Mrs. Annesley asked before he could exit the room. He would be away at this moment, if it were not for those blasted tears in his sister's eyes. His own sorrow somehow deepened at the thought of causing her pain. 3 or 4 days, he responded uncertainly. That should give enough time for Mrs. Reynolds to prepare for my arrival. He turned toward his sister. "I will not send any correspondence until tomorrow." She nodded, but did not look up at him. The action was so reminiscent of how she had been following Ramsgate that he feared he was setting her progress back. "I cannot remain in town, Georgiana. I just cannot." He gave a nod to Mrs. Annesley and, leaving the music room, headed to his study. He did not, however, reach his destination before hearing a most unwelcome sound in the foyer. He glanced in the direction of Caroline Bingley's voice, hoping that she had not yet seen him and he might hide away undetected. From the hand she lifted to wave at him, he knew he was not to be so fortunate. "Mr. Darcy," she called. He sighed and turned in her direction. "I have come to call on your sister. She is such a dear, and I do dote on her," she explained as she removed her gloves and coat. "Louisa and I were uncertain if I would be so fortunate as to see you as well, since my brother would not join us. He has been in such a foul mood since our arrival. He stomps about, slamming doors and replying only in one-word answers. It is absolutely impossible to have a conversation with him about anything." "He was not pleased with your arrival in town?" Darcy asked. "Most decidedly not," said Louisa. "I was thanking the heavens that I did not have to remain under his roof that first night." She shook her head and clucked her tongue. "Such a show of temper!" Darcy's eyebrows drew together. A show of temper from Bingley! He motioned to the sitting-room in invitation to the two ladies. Bingley did not anger easily. He would become disgruntled at times, and even cantankerous. But rarely did he become angry to the point of making a display. Darcy wished to rub the small pain that was developing between his eyes. His friend must have been even more attached to Miss Bennet than he had suspected. "I do not jest," Louisa continued as she moved toward the room he had indicated. "I thought he was going to banish Caroline to our aunt's house." "He nearly did," Caroline assured Darcy. How he wished she would walk further away from him than she was. It seemed she always had to be within arm's length of his person, as if being there assured her the possibility of grasping him if he should attempt to disappear, which at this moment he wished he could. "I should go get Georgiana," he muttered. Caroline made a small sound of disbelief and favoured him with an amused smile. "Mr. Wright will see to it," she cajoled. "Darcy House only employs the best." She perched herself on a settee near his favourite chair. He ignored her and walked to the window. "Your brother is truly put out?" "He is!" cried Louisa. "Did he not seem so to you?" "I have not seen him," Darcy admitted. "Count yourself fortunate," Louisa continued. "He shouted about needing to learn estate management and how it could not be managed from town. Then he started in on how he had not taken proper leave of his new acquaintances and moved into something about servants who were depending upon him for their livelihoods. And then he grabbed his hat and coat and flew out of the house saying he would speak to you and set things right." "I was indisposed when he arrived," Darcy muttered. He had not thought Bingley would be quite so distraught about his neighbours and servants. Letters could be sent to neighbours, and servants could be kept on. It was not as if Bingley had to be there for them to go about their duties. Both Pemberley and Darcy House still employed staff even when their master was not in residence. It was not the same as employing a worker in a mill or shop who only worked when the place of business was open. "And he would not come with you today?" "He is rather put out," said Louisa. Darcy leaned against the window frame. Hopefully he had not lost a dear friend. That thought was just as jarring as the tears he had witnessed in his sister's eyes a few moments ago. He shook his head. Apparently he had made a rather large mess of things. "He was growing far too attached to the area," said Caroline. "We have done him a service in separating him from it. The neighbourhood was not fit for one such as he. If we had remained, he would likely become just as repugnant as the rest." Darcy tilted his head and studied Caroline. She was looking very pleased with herself. "Not everyone was distasteful. I remember you and Mrs. Hurst found Miss Bennet to be to your liking." Caroline tittered. "She was the most superior lady in the area, but that does not mean she is to be our equal." Darcy's brow furrowed. Miss Bennet was a gentleman's daughter, and as such she was not Caroline's equal, but rather outranked her. "And our brother can surely do better than a penniless country nobody," Caroline added, "no matter how prettily she smiles." "I suppose you are correct," Darcy muttered uneasily. He had disparaged Miss Bennet and her connections as readily as Caroline when he was convincing himself that removal from Netherfield was necessary. But hearing Caroline speaking now, it struck him how very arrogant it sounded. Again, he considered just what sort of muddle he had created. "You said just as much, did you not?" Louisa asked. Darcy nodded. Bingley had the wealth to attract a greater connection. That much was true. However, having spent the last 2 days in agony, attempting to rid his heart of its desire for a lady who did not even smile at him, as Miss Bennet did Bingley, he was beginning to rethink his assessment. He rubbed that pounding place between his eyes. There was no reconciling his heart and his head while here in town. He needed peace and quiet, and days of roads between him and Hertfordshire to accomplish such a task. "I cannot see how a gentleman's daughter is not good enough," said Georgiana, who had just entered the room during the last exchange. "Georgiana," Darcy cautioned. She raised a brow and flipped her head. "Why, I am only a gentleman's daughter," she said as she took a seat. "But a wealthy one," said Louisa, "and with relations that are titled." Georgiana shrugged and fixed her brother with a piercing stare. "Then I suppose I shall have to be content to be sold to the gentleman most in need of my wealth and standing, no matter where my heart might lie." "Georgiana," Darcy scolded, "that is not what was said." "Was it not?" She fluttered her lashes at him, gave him a small smile, and said, "Then I do apologise," before turning from him and, to his great annoyance, ignoring him as much as she was able for the remainder of Caroline and Louisa's call. "Georgiana," Darcy called as his sister passed the door to his study later that day. Georgiana took 4 more steps before stopping and abandoning her plan to ignore his summons. There was no need to stir his ire any further. He was likely angry enough with her for her recent behaviour. She had not seen him scowl as much as he had during Caroline and Louisa's call in a very long time. "You wish to see me?" she asked from the doorway. "Come in and sit down." He leaned back in his chair and waited for her to comply. "Your behaviour today was quite disturbing." Georgiana bit her lower lip and lowered her gaze to her hands. "It is completely unacceptable for you to speak as you did, and in front of guests." He rose and came to stand before her. "It was disrespectful. I expect so much more from you. Where have I erred?" Georgiana peeked up at him. He was propped against his desk with his arms folded across his chest, looking down at her with such a sad expression that it nearly destroyed her determination to press her point. However, if she truly wished to see that heartbroken look in his eyes removed forever, she must not waver. Therefore, looking down once again at her hands, which were nervously twisting in her lap, she answered, "Our parents, as well as you yourself, have taught me that a Darcy's word is to be steadfast. I am to consider promises carefully before I make them, because a promise should not be broken save for the noblest of reasons." "This is true," Darcy muttered. Georgiana lifted her eyes to his. "That is where you have erred. You promised Mr. Bingley that if he leased Netherfield, you would spend the autumn and most of the winter seeing that he had things well in hand before Easter. Yet you have come home and refused to return to Netherfield for who knows what reason." She lifted a brow. "I truly do not believe it is to save him from a lady who is beneath him." "None of that explains your behaviour." "No, it does not," Georgiana agreed. "But it is my answer to your question. You have not erred with me. I know my behaviour was wanting and drastically so. However, it seemed the best way to capture your attention and get you to listen to me." She stood and placed her hands on his folded arms. "You are my brother, and I love you with all my heart and hold you in the highest regard. You have cared well for me. You have even saved me from certain ruin. I wish to repay your kindness, if only I knew how." He pulled his arms out from under her grasp and opened them wide to her in invitation. Gladly she stepped into his embrace. "Let me love you," she whispered. "Allow me to care for you and point out your errors when I see them. I am not the foolish girl I once was." She laid her head against his broad chest and listened to him pull in a deep breath and expel it in a whoosh. "We are all fools at times," he murmured as he squeezed her tight. "If there was a way for you to assist me with my current dilemma, I would gladly seek your help, but I fear there is not." "Will you not keep your promise to Bingley?" she asked quietly. He sighed. "Your point was valid. I shall consider it." "Are you still leaving?" His grip on her tightened. "I do not know. I long to leave, to be far away from—" His voice trailed off, and the room was silent for half a minute. "I will consider staying, but I cannot promise beyond that." "I am sorry," she said. "You are forgiven," he replied. She shook her head as he released her. "Not just for my behaviour." "Then what?" he asked as she moved toward the door. "That I could not save your heart from breaking." She smiled a sad, knowing smile at him as she said the words that he had repeated to her over and over again after her ordeal with Wickham. He stood quietly, looking at her as if he was uncertain if he should acknowledge that what she had said was true or false. It is in your eyes, Fitzwilliam." "Your heartache is in your eyes," she whispered, and then took her leave.